Scottish Parliament being value for money?
Well, I think we're absolutely clear that there must be no increased taxation in a Scottish Parliament. What Scottish business is most concerned about is that costs in Scotland will rise higher than those south of the border, and that would be disastrous for Scottish business, and we would see a flow of talent and jobs south. And just to go back briefly to the SNP, you know, we've been in this election campaign for 4 weeks. It's quite remarkable that it's now only 1 week to go to polling day, and the SNP have still to produce their financial statement for an independent Scotland.
Well, Wales too is going to the polls next week, but the election campaign there has been as dominated by concern over apathy and the complex voting system as questions of party policy. Under a system designed to be fairer to smaller parties, electors will have 2 votes, one for their constituency and a second for their region. The paradox of the system means a massive vote for the party in the constituencies will mean their chances of winning a regional seat less likely. And this could be worrying for Labour. Tony Blair's choice for First Secretary of Wales is Alan Michael. He's top of Labour's list for the Mid and West Wales region, made up of 8 constituencies. But if Labour does too well in those seats, he could fail to get elected. Claire Catford went to the key seat of Carmarthen East, the constituency which could determine his fate.
Visions of success are what the politicians are dreaming of. Visit Carmarthen's psychic exhibition and you get another perspective on how all parties will fare.
It'll be close running with 3 of them, and I feel that the person who's going to win is going to be an outsider. So it's somebody that's maybe not stood for this area or something that's coming from a different area.
Predictions apart, the facts are that Carmarthen is part of the Mid and West Wales region, which is home to 400,000 voters. Turnout on May the 6th is expected to mirror the referendum in 1997 at around 56%.
Despite the fact that the election is only a week away, it's hardly making front-page news here. Journalists say they won't be putting it on the front page of this week's local paper. Last week's Carmarthen Journal led with roads, chaos, risking lives, rather than political intrigue. Will you be voting in next week's elections?
No.
No.
Don't you want to use your vote?
No, not really, because everybody's lying about everything and one person says they're going to do this and they don't do it, and so there's no point, is there?
This apparent lack of interest is echoed by a report out this week that suggested that apathy could play a part in the final result here.
Up until now it's been pretty much a quiet campaign and a quiet response to campaigns as well.
Why is that, do you think?
Because people are not quite sure what's going to happen. They can't believe that the election is here already. I can't believe it either, to be honest with you, and it seems to have come along now ever so quickly after the referendum.
Plaid Cymru won its first Welsh seat in the Carmarthen by-election in 1966 and is hoping for the same wave of enthusiasm in 1999. The party's convinced they'll reap the benefits if voters decide to stay away from the polling stations.
Now if you want us to take it out, right? Right, the election coming up. Well, we certainly know that our people will turn out. Our supporters have told us that they will turn out. I think there's an incentive for our supporters to turn out, and perhaps that incentive isn't there for Labour people who feel disillusioned with the party and disillusioned with the way Tony Blair's leading them.
Travel to another part of this region and you'll find Labour's Carmarthen East candidate doing his bit on the doorstep, supported by the Secretary of State for Wales.
Alan Michael, pleased to meet you. This is Llewellyn, who's the constituency candidate, so hope we'll have your support on the 6th of May.
Ironically, Alan Michael could be a victim of his colleague's success. The more seats Labour wins here, the less eligible the party is for top-up seats. Result, the possibility of no Assembly seat for the Blair favourite.
That's a story that's been put around, particularly by Plaid Cymru, because it makes a good story to have an idea of a cliffhanger. But the reality is, I think, that we're going to get the support to do very well in the constituency seats and to win at least 1, possibly 2 in the regional seats.
Based on 1997 referendum figures, the 2 top Conservative regional list candidates should gain seats in Mid and West Wales because the list system is designed to favour parties with a smaller share of the vote. This is also an indication of the uphill struggle the party is appearing to have in its attempt to win an individual constituency.
Conservatives, I think, have had a rough time in Carmarthen for a long time. This is horses for courses, and I could take you to other places in Wales where the Wales are a bit of earth. Yeah, if you're here, yes, it's a difficult thing to come by spare votes in Carmarthen East. That's reality.
Mid and West Wales will be the last region to declare results on Friday the 7th. This was the case in 1997 too. Only then will the Blair-backed Alan Michael know if he's in or out. And only then will all the candidates know if their success or failure was due to deliberate voting choice or apathetic disinterest.
Well, to talk about the Welsh campaign, I was joined by former Western Mail political journalist Mike Settle, and from Cardiff by Barry Jones, senior lecturer in politics at Cardiff University. I began by asking Mike Settle if he had been struck by the level of apathy in Wales.
Certainly. I mean, one of the main problems, in fact the enemy of all the parties, particularly Labour and the Tories, is apathy. Given what's been happening with Labour over the last year or two, the internal wrangles they've been having, and the disaffection amongst some of the old Labourites in Wales with the new Labour regime, they could either not vote or vote nationalist. And in the Tories' case, a lot of them don't even believe in devolution, so they'll go shopping or play golf on May the 6th.
And if we can go over to Barry Jones now, as you know, it's a novel system. Do you think that system is going to be helpful to the major parties, or will it help the small parties as it's designed to do?
Well, I think it's going to confuse lots and lots of people. It's the first time they're confronted with the option of casting two votes, and that certainly causes problems. I think what will tend to happen is that some people will cast their first vote for the first-past-the-post candidate in their constituency, and many might then be reluctant to cast or be apprehensive about casting their second vote. But I think there is a tendency shown in the polls that that some people will vote Labour because they have this strong loyalty, but some will then vote for another party on their second vote, and that is the real problem for Labour. In addition, in the Carmarthenshire area, there's a campaign group called Think Again. One doesn't know how strong it is, but they're calling for Labour voters to vote for their Labour candidate in the constituency, but then not vote Labour in the regional constituency.
And do you think that if Labour gets a high vote, as predictions are, if they do get a high vote, then that really does damage Alan Michael's chances?
Well, if Labour do particularly well at the constituency level and at the regional level, then that should result in them being less qualified to gather in votes at the regional level, and that would have implications for the Labour leader. And I think there is a real problem here in the party generally, is that they haven't really worked out how to sell the idea for Labour voters to vote Labour on the second ballot, because all the evidence suggests that Labour will do so well on the first ballot that in very few cases will they get any benefit from the second ballot.
Politics can be a cruel mistress. Ask any MP. Even better, just ask William Hague. With just under a week to go until the Welsh, Scottish and local elections, things could hardly be more discouraging for the Tories. Early in the week, the row over Peter Lilly's controversial speech on privatisation left the party in apparent disarray, and opinion polls showed the Conservatives a horrifying 25 points behind Labour. And Mr Hague's personal position, despite his relaunch, is no better, with only 10% of voters seeing him as a capable leader. On Wednesday night, William Hague tried to explain that his great admiration for Margaret Thatcher was undiminished, despite the party's new direction.
Change and renewal is always difficult. And some people are bound to be nervous now that we've set off on our journey of change, but haven't yet arrived at our destination. And I know that there are some commentators, there are some people outside the party, our friends, who wish us well, but are worried. But I know our destination.
I was joined by the Conservative MP Richard Shepherd. I began by asking him whether it was true that there was concern amongst Tories that the party was turning its back on Thatcherism.
I think it's the way that it's been expressed rather than the way it in fact seems to be presented. There is concern when language seems to contradict the major thrust of Conservative Party development policy over the last, say, 10 years. And there is an irony, of course, in as much as the New Labour has camped on that ground as in extending very conservative areas. I mean, it must be a matter for you.
Does that mean that the Conservative Party feels it's got to recolonise the ground or change its direction?
If I may just make an observation, one of the fears I have, you'll know much more about this than I, Nigel, but these focus groups, and where you say what is wrong, once you start a hare running, such as national health and commitment to, you can get a misreading of it. And I'll only cite as an instance of this. In the Uxbridge by-election, you may well remember this, immediately after the election, Labour composed a focus group. And one of the questions it put to it was the electorate anxious about an outsider being parachuted in. What it had the result of doing was turning 3 good committed Labour supporters into 2 anti-Labour for the purposes of the by-election. And my fear, and I think it is quite a widespread fear, certainly the parliamentary party, is that focusing on focus groups as the way in which you identify the issues that you feel strongly about and therefore can communicate to an electorate is fuzzy.
How much do you think that the problems we see on the Conservative front bench are the result of experienced people like Kenneth Clarke and others stepping back? Is there immaturity there?
I am concerned about us not keeping in the public eye and in a prominent way people whom a wider electorate has great sympathy for and can identify. I, for instance, would love to see someone like Ken Clarke as the Shadow Home Secretary. These are people of experience. Norman Fowler in a role, because his work in the Home Office brief, Shadow Home Office brief, has been formidable.
The Scottish people about the